Today I'm showing you how I paint the floral swag on the mini gingers. Let's get started. We begin by just creating a regular line right across the frosted ginger chest. And once I fill up my brush with the necessary paint, I'm just testing this out on a test strip first. And the size brushes and the paint colors and everything are all in your paint packet. So I'm testing it out to make sure that I have it right where I want it. Now I'm ready to paint the first layer. That's in your steps in the painting packet. I kind of put these in a zigzag all the way across. These are really light. You can see that there's very little paint on my paintbrush, but I just put it all the way across the line on each side. So I kind of take turns doing the top and the bottom and the top and the bottom. Come back the other way and maybe have the leaves going in a different direction. Before we start the next step, I really wanted to give you a chance to see how my palette looks. Over on this side over here, I have my blending gel. You can barely see it on the film, but I actually work in the blending gel on the side, so I have some areas where I'm working with the blending gel if I ever need to very lightly come back and pick it up. You're also going to notice that my paint I usually use in lines, not big puddles of paint. So here we're ready to start the other color leaves, a little bit darker. I'm going to test out on a test strip just to make sure I've got my colors right. When I'm loading my brush on these, I'm only loading one corner of the brush and then I work it in on the palette. So now that I have my color the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and pick some up. Again, only one side of that brush, only one corner, and then I work it in. And I'm going to go in and add in those darker leaves, kind of the same way I did with the lighter ones. These are just going to be just a little bit darker. And I'm going to do the tops, and then I'm going to do the bottoms. Just like this. Some I might make maybe different directions all the way across. Just like that. Once it's completely dry, I'm ready to start doing some petals. I have this area here. That's going to be my work area. Again, you'll see the paint lines instead of the paint puddles. I'm putting some blending gel right here to get it ready. That way, that's my work area and how I'm going to go ahead and blend the brush. So my brush is already ready and filled with blending gel. I've picked up one corner with the white and one corner with the violet, and I'm working this back and forth. You can see what it looks like on the brush. And let's try these out on a test strip. I'm going to paint right over these little leaves just to give you an idea. You can see the pressure that I add here, and I'm just kind of pouncing, and it makes these little tiny petals. Pressure really helps me to achieve with the miniature painting more of a petal look or the roses look. You can see how I do that. It's not too hard. So I filled up my brush again. Let's put some in here. I'll start over here, and I'm just gonna lightly pounce in. I add a little bit of pressure and lift up some initial layers of petals. So as I'm looking at this, I'm saying, I can almost think of a little tip as I'm doing this. I'm going to pounce along all the different areas. I'm going to leave a marker along here of all the different areas that I want to add my flowers and see how they might look. I just thought of that as I'm doing this. Didn't do that in the original. That's okay though. So we'll just add the initial petals. All around. Notice where my white is. Notice how the white is on the outside. I like to keep the white, especially for miniature work, I like to keep the white on the outside of the flower petal. You can switch it if you want, but when you're working small, I find the white to really work well. Just brings out the flowers a little bit more. And I go back and kind of dot in some more petals. We're going to be ready now for the next layer of petals. With the same color. I'm just going to go back in and add, I'm going to flip my brush a little bit. You're going to notice now that I'm working on the inside, I'm going to turn that so the white maybe will touch the darker areas and I can add in some final petals. These are going to be the bigger flowers on the swag. You don't have to make them this way, but this is just how I did it. And I wanted to have a little bit bigger initially on the bottom. So those other flowers aren't going to be quite as big and you won't be able to, you won't have to go back in and add more petals. So we're just going to lightly tap it. Now sometimes you end up making a mistake like I did here. You can see right there where that outside of that petal doesn't look quite right. So because I'm working with the blending gel, I'm able to take one of these makeup Q-tips and just lightly tap and it just disappears. You don't have to worry about it. See how it picks it right up? So here you can see where I kind of got carried away and I decided to go ahead and add in the crown. I'll probably paint the crown later, but this video I want to show you how I did the floral swag. So we're ready to go ahead and add in some wisteria with that little mop. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of the white on one side of the mop and a little bit of the blue on the other. You can see it there. And what I do is I do the work on the palette. I pounce it in a little bit to do my blending there. I don't do my blending on the surface, especially something like the mini gingers. There isn't a lot of room to work with anyway, so you really want to do most of your blending on your palette. I'm even going to test this out just to make sure, because I don't want to make sure it's too dark. And if you notice, I pretty much use the mop vertically. See how I'm using it vertically? Up and down, vertically straight. It makes a nice cleaner pounce. If I'm doing it on an angle like this, it gets a little messy. Now that might be used for something else, but that's really not what you want to do here. More vertical. So I'll just go ahead and add in a few more of these to make sure that exactly what I want, and then I'm ready to start. So I'll just add these in. You really want to try to be very patient when you're doing these and be very do them very sparingly. You don't want to add too much of this. This is just to accent, so you don't want it to be too heavy. Otherwise it's really going to take away from those really pretty flowers we just painted. We're ready for the next set of layer of flowers. These are just as easy as the first ones. We're going to make these just a little bit more visible. And this time we're going to use a filbert brush. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that, again, on the actual, let me move it over here, on the actual test strip, that it's exactly what I'm looking for. See how these petals are a little bit different? I just do that for more interest. You can still use the other size, but I really like using the filbert to just accent the other flowers. So we're ready and it's blended. So we're going to be able to go ahead and add these in here now. Again, these are going to be more visible than the other ones. So I'm going to find places that I can sort of scoot these in here. I'm not going to need to come back to these because the way I'm painting them, they have enough paint and they're going to have enough accent on them that they'll just get one look over before I'm ready to move on. Maybe add a little bit of white afterwards, but not too much. This royal fuchsia color, I think that's the color we're using, accents nice with the violet and the blue. To me, it kind of gives the hint of a little bit of those, you know, rose buds that are kind of starting to bloom. And I'm just kind of smush them in here. All right. So I'm going to show you something that I do. I'm going to keep my brush with all the paint on it. I'm going to scoop up some blending gel. And with the blending gel, I'm going to make kind of a puddle, and I'm going to blend the blending gel into the already filled paint. What that does is it creates a kind of very translucent, that's even too much, see, very translucent flower, and I use it kind of as an accent. And even in things like a floral swag or something like that, you can use that translucency to just accent your painting, and it really softens things up, makes it look kind of dreamy. It's kind of the secret sauce, in my opinion. I just love doing the impressionistic flowers. They don't show up too much right away, but they do once you varnish. You'll be happy you did it. I really like it because it really does soften it. So here we're adding the final layer of the flowers, the melon and the white. I tested that out. I love the way the melon looks with the pinks and the purples and the violets. I think for me it just makes it pop. So with these I'm going to be a little bit more broader. I'm still going to be mindful of where my brush is, as far as I'm going to keep the white on the outside part. Again, because we're working tiny and we want to kind of soften up things, but we don't want to take too much away from the green that we have in the background. So I'm just going to use very light strokes of just kind of accents here and there. we're ready here to paint in some vines and some trundles. I've got my liner brush and I've got it already prepared like I did all the other brushes with some blending gel. You can see how thin. I really wanted to get a close-up of this for you to see just how thin and how little the amount of paint that I'm actually going to be working with, that we're working with. So when I test this out to make sure that I'm not going to make these big thick lines, because I don't want to ruin the floral swag, I'm just going to very lightly, as you see, go over it. Notice my angle of the brush. Notice also you can't see my hands, can you? You can't see how far up I am on the brush. I'm like halfway up on the brush handle. Because here, when I'm doing the real fine work, I'm able to go down further near the ferrule because I know how much pressure I want to use on certain areas. And then the other areas, I'm gonna go up on my handle. See, I want some of these much darker to really accent the floral. Then the others, I want a lot lighter. When you're new to do this kind of painting, so fine, so miniature, having your hand on the handle in a different area can really help. It really helps with the pressure. So I just add these little wisps all through here. So it's looking pretty good. What I did was I filled one of the makeup Q-tips with some blending gel. And I'm going to go in and maybe I want to soften up some areas. Maybe some of them got a little mucked up. Again, we're working really tiny, right? So let's clean things up a little bit. We're working with blending gel, so it's easy to go ahead in and pick up some things. Maybe I want some shadows in some areas. Maybe I want some of the green to blend in with some of the petals. So I just blot it around, and it just helps pick it up a little bit. Lightens things up a little. Get a close up so you can see it. So now we're ready for those final leaves that we're going to have stand out. I'm going to use the darker green. This is the thicket, I believe. I'm going to add those final leaves on top of the whole design. So let's test these out, see what these are going to look like. Make sure I like them. Yep, that's about what I was looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and find areas in the design where I just want them to really stand out a little bit more. Maybe the green got kind of lost by all the flowers and everything, and I still want it to look like a swag, so we got to have leaves in there, right? So I'm just going to go in and sort of think of how I want these flowers to look. And I'm going to plop in some more thicker, more pronounced leaves in here throughout the design. You can sort of see how it makes it stand out. just put them all over and then stand back and look at it. Now we're ready to just add a little bit of accent, and we're just going to do some final touches of the white, pure white. We're not going to mix it with anything. I'm just going to go in to soften up this, make it stand out a little bit more. You don't have to do this, but I like a softer look, especially when I'm working with all these little gingers and stuff. I like to make them look a little softer, a little silly. The white helps me do that. And I think that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful. Take care. Happy painting.